Ladies and gents, my name's PepperBelly, and in this video, I want to discuss replicating real-world weapon recoil in tactical shooters and MilSims. This is usually a hot topic during a game's development for those particular genres, and has been mostly so for Interstellar Marines as of late. Ever since the recent update for that game that completely redesigned the recoil system, this has been wildly debated. Many hated the new recoil system, and some, like myself, actually loved it. The thing to keep in mind is that Interstellar Marines is trying to be as realistic as possible, while still trying to retain being a simplified gaming experience. The game isn't trying to be a military simulator, but it does want to be realistic. So for that update, community manager and former Marine, who goes by the name Spectre, began working on the weapons to improve their realism and feel, and he's still actively making tweaks to it. But first, let's identify the three main ways to replicate recoil in a game. 1. You have random cone of fires, spreading crosshairs, etc. 2. You have muzzle climb that is fixed to your screen's orientation. And 3. Muzzle drift under sustained fire that moves independently from your screen's orientation. Now, most of the classics use the first method, which is random cone of fire. This was mostly done due to the technical limitation of the time, as admitted by a lot of the developers. If you look at the original Rainbow Six and Ghost Recon, these are prime examples of that model. The thing is, those games were able to get away with it fairly easily due to the lack of a first-person weapon model. This allowed the crosshair to be a complete culmination of many aspects that ultimately influenced your accuracy without giving a false representation of the weapon's proper orientation. Why most shooters still use this method today is questionable. There is a level of realism to it though, so long as things aren't grossly over-exaggerated, but unfortunately, more often than not, that's the case. Games like Call of Duty that desperately cling to the idea that if you don't aim down your sights, the weapon's feelings will be hurt, so it'll deviate and curve the bullet's trajectory to hit the ground in front of you, or the ceiling, or any other random direction that isn't where the muzzle is actually pointing. This, as you may have guessed, is highly unrealistic. It's a game mechanic put in place to force the use of your weapon's sights. Call of Duty was big on this and still is. They thought that they were the epitome of realistic weapon sight implementation, so they forced you to use them thinking that's the only way to engage a threat, period. And if you didn't, you suffered the consequences of being incredibly inaccurate. Now, as I was saying, there is a level of realism to this. Arma 3 does it right, for example. The crosshairs indicate where the bullets will land, not only where the center of your screen is. Every round you fire will not land outside of the designated area, but will still land randomly within the crosshair. That is a great representation of firing a weapon. In real life, you know the general direction of where your bullets will go, but not under sustained fire. They will land in random spots at a predictable location. As a shooter, the further away the target is, the more space there is for the rounds to land. So for example, if your crosshairs are set for a target at 50 meters, and you fire your entire magazine at that target, every round should hit it. But you will see that they're randomly spread out all over the target. Now place another target at 100 meters, and you'll notice that only half of your crosshair fills the target due to it being further away and smaller. This time, if you fire half of your magazine, hypothetically, only half of your rounds will land on target, and the others will land around it. Having the crosshairs artificially spread a tiny bit, or however much, depending on movement speed, is also realistic, as the muzzle is moving more. But if you start to fire the weapon, causing the crosshairs to spread all to hell, making your shots land all over the place within close proximity to you, that's when a game throws all realism and credibility out the window. Despite this game not really being a tactical shooter, the best example other than Arma 3 that I can give would be Mass Effect 1, as it functions exactly the way I just described earlier. So let's discuss the second method now. A lot of games adopt this method, and it's currently what Interstellar Marines has implemented in their latest update. Some notable others would be SWAT 4, Squad, and Takedown Red Saber, although the latter does it terribly. The idea behind this recoil system is that you as the player must learn and control each weapon's recoil characteristics. It adds a level of depth there, meaning you can't be lazy and hose down individuals with pinpoint accuracy. If you want to fire in fully automatic at targets beyond 50 meters, landing every shot, then you better damn well put in the effort to achieve that level of accuracy, because nobody in real life can do that from an unsupported firing position. Now, naturally, some of you will argue that in real life, muzzles do not climb so violently, if at all, and you would be right. Most standard military weapons have flash hiders that vent expelled gas from the muzzle upwards as the bullet leaves the barrel to reduce muzzle climb. That, and most weapons have the action or bolt in line with the stock. In fact, the M4 and M16, or in Canada, the C8 and C7, have the buffer spring located directly in the weapon stock. This was the original design philosophy behind the M16. It was to replace the M14. The M14, if you look at it, has the stock slightly lower than the action. As a result, when you fire the weapon, the pivotal point is higher than where the stock sits in your shoulder, which is near the trigger, resulting in a rotating upwards motion, creating muzzle climb. This made it incredibly difficult to maintain sustained accurate fire. Enter the M16. By lowering the action to be in line with the stock, the only pivotal point is where the stock makes contact with your shoulder. It pushes directly back into you. This created a problem though. Now it was difficult to aim down the weapon sights as the weapon now sat lower in your shoulder. And this is where the classic M16 iron sights come in. It was elevated to alleviate that issue and kind of act as a carrying handle as well. All that said, we are talking about games, and it's near impossible to replicate true characteristics of firing a weapon. You can get pretty damn close, but not 100% accurate. In real life, under sustained fire, you have to lean into the weapon. Even a simple M4 can offset your balance when emptying your magazine on a target on fully automatic. So a game's mechanic of muzzle climb is to simulate that as best as possible. So think of moving your mouse down to counter the recoil more like leaning into the weapon versus actually literally countering the weapon's muzzle climb. That's the idea behind this method. The character in-game doesn't artificially do this for you, making it easier to control sustained fire. Instead, you must control it, and since it's difficult to control, it makes firing in semi-automatic or in short bursts more viable, hence more realism, since in real life, that is what we use. And all that leads to the third method. If you recall, the third method is muzzle drift under sustained fire that moves independent of your screen. This is also realistic, and from a visual and aesthetic perspective and point of view, looks the most realistic. The only game that I can currently think of that does this is Ground Branch. Now, although the game may be going through many changes in the recoil department throughout its development, I'm still going to discuss how it functions currently in comparison to the other methods. Essentially, what happens under sustained fire in first person is that your screen will stay perfectly straight, fixed on your target, but the weapon itself will begin to drift to the right and upwards, meaning to maintain perfect accuracy on your target, you have to pull the mouse down and left. Now, the beauty of this method is that semi-automatic is truly king when compared to the fixed vertical climb method, since only the weapon moves and very little unless it's sustained fire. This also makes firing shorter bursts on fully automatic more efficient and viable than simply spraying everywhere. The downside, though, is that spraying everywhere can still be effective, although more disorienting, since when your magazine empties, the center of your screen is looking towards the ground and the weapon realigns with it, so you have to readjust your screen to begin another fully automatic spray. Your character in-game artificially controls the recoil to a degree, so that you don't have to counter the recoil nearly as much as the vertical muzzle climb method. Each one has their up and downsides. Ultimately, it's up to the developer on how they want to best replicate recoil in their game. But another factor that I haven't touched on that also influences how recoil behaves is movement and weapon sway. Ground Branch does it in a pretty realistic manner, which makes sense since everything was mocapped. This is why the current recoil system, when firing in fully automatic in that game, can't be abused nearly as much as other games, because too much excessive movement jars your weapon quite a bit, destabilizing it like in the real world, making you ineffective when engaging an enemy. So you have to stop, let the weapon stabilize, gain a sight picture, and then engage, or engage when moving slowly and steadily. And if you guys are familiar with Arma 2, it has a similar system where each step you take translates to the weapon. It's almost like you can feel each step just by observing the way the weapon reacts to movement. In the end, they all have their trade-offs. One is not particularly better than the other. Some look more realistic, some feel more gamey, but in the end, they're all methods of trying to emulate realism as best as possible. Using the second and third method requires more work with actual animations, character movement, and sway, whereas cone of fire, spreading crosshairs achieves the same thing through simpler means. So it's up to the developer in the end how they want to go about doing things. They want to best replicate it through visual means or simplify it with simpler mechanics. And with that, I'll end this video. My name's been PepperBelly. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.